I'm really pleased to be joined here by Jess. Jess's dad started showing symptoms of young onset Alzheimer's in his 40s when Jess was just 11 years old. In her late teens, Jess then found out that she had a 50% chance of inheriting familial Alzheimer's disease and later decided to go ahead with genetic screening. So, Jess, can you tell us a little bit about how you found out that your dad had an inherited form of Alzheimer's? What impact did this have on you and your family?
Yeah, so it's hard to remember some of the bits because I was quite young. So when I was about 11, 12, 13, I remember that he started to just not pick me up from places. So I might be out with my friends and he wouldn't turn up. And that, for me, that was some of the first signs. Then my mum's previously said that my dad started saying he had this sort of strange feeling in his head. He said it was like he had cotton wool in his head. Everything was a bit fuzzy. He worked as an architectural technician, so doing digital designs for buildings.
Mm.
Um, and he was struggling a lot at work and eventually did lose his job. Um, that was in his early 40s. And then because he had to keep paying the mortgage, obviously a working age person, he he ended up having to get two or three different jobs that were lower paying to try to make up for it. So he was doing a night shift at Tesco's and then truck driving in the daytime. Um, and this isn't something I've really discussed before, just because at the stage previously he was at, it wasn't very comfortable for him to talk about. But now he's reaching kind of the later stages of the disease. I've become a bit more vocal and talking about it, and I think it's really important for awareness. But he had an accident while he was driving his truck, where he actually hit a motorcyclist going in the other direction. Um, Previous to this, my mum had tried to get him a diagnosis and it had fallen on deaf ears multiple times. They just saw it as he was too young. At that stage, there was, I guess, not as much awareness of the genetic forms of dementia, and we didn't have a gene that had been sourced within the family.
Mm.
So this motorcyclist actually died, and my dad ended up going to prison for. He got 2 years. He did a year, because at that time there was no death by careless driving. It was classed immediately as death by dangerous driving. I think he missed out on what would have been that by a couple of months.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was a really, really difficult time. I was about 16 at the time. But at the same time, him being in prison was the only thing that moved forward him getting a diagnosis.
Yeah.
So the psychiatrist within the prison noticed that something clearly wasn't right. Even now, I look back at a couple of the letters he sent me from prison, and he's repeating himself in all the letters. So again, it's like this slow realization of it rather than
Mhm.
one, like we did think that was there, but when you're told by professionals that that's not the case, you kind of just have to go with it.
Mhm.
And then it was when I was at university, when I was 18, that I think, yeah, when I was 18, that he called me to say he had a formal diagnosis and that it was a specific gene. And of course, for me at that point, it was a relief because we'd done all our research
Yeah.
and I was pretty sure that that was what it was. But it,
Mhm.
it did take years and years to get that. I think he was actually 50 at the time, so maybe I was 19. So yeah, that's kind of how it unraveled. Obviously, I was a university student at the
Yeah.
time, so I didn't give as much thought to it as I perhaps would have done
Mhm.
at the time. But then, yeah, by the time I was in my early 20s, I was very set on the fact that I wanted a genetic test for it.
Yeah, that's a very difficult, lengthy process to getting a diagnosis for your dad. It's a really difficult time for all of
Yeah.
you. So you did eventually go on and have the screening. What factors did you consider before deciding to go for that test?
Well, I was in a relationship. I was in a stable relationship for 2 years with my now husband. Um, we moved quite quickly, and we had actually discussed having children. I think I was 24 when we started the process. I was 25 when I got my test results. Um, I remember I was wanting to find out very quickly, because I'm one of these people that I hate not knowing, and I
Mm-hmm.
hated feeling like I had this hanging over me, and I knew that it could go either way. And if it was a yes and I had the gene, it would be hanging over me. But I
Yeah.
felt like it was hanging over me
Mm-hmm.
anyway. I think some people are very much, they're much better at compartmentalizing these things. I wasn't.
Yeah.
It was something I thought about regularly and affecting my daily life. So for me, I had a 50% chance of kind of being free of those feelings, or a 50% chance of at least knowing and dealing with it and planning. And a lot of mine came down to planning. Like, I'm very much someone who needs to know, I need to be informed and supported
Yeah.
to feel like I can have a better outcome,
Mm-hmm.
know what's going to happen. Um, and so they were the kind of things that I wanted to know. I also felt like I was doing a lot of, I was getting involved in research, and that was really important to me. And I felt like taking part in the research just opened my eyes a bit more to a lot of it. And I just wanted to know, while doing all these things,
Yeah.
where I was actually at, because also doing the research, I started to overthink everything. Like, the year before, did I get a better result the year before or not? Am I, and even if you're in your 20s, you still think that that
Yeah.
process could start quite early. Um, but for me, yeah, it was needing to know. And it was also the fact that I knew that I would want to plan doing IVF for any children that I had
Yeah.
in the future.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. And so you did take the test, and I think your outcome was. Do you want to
Negative.
tell us? Yeah, it was negative. So you found that out. Yeah.
Yeah. I had definitely said to myself that I had it by that point.
Mm.
I think you generally work yourself up
Yeah.
and decide that on the worst possible case scenario. So I was quite shocked to find
Mhm.
out I didn't have it. Um, I actually didn't tell I only dealt with it with my husband, um, and had to then tell other family members. And you think it's a really good thing, but it's actually really, really tough. And for
Mhm.
instance, my sister still doesn't know if she has it or not. She is a completely different character to me, and we
Mhm.
behave in different ways with it. And so there is this sense of guilt, um, and also having to explain why I hadn't got the other members of the family involved with it, because
Mhm.
I just knew I couldn't deal with other people's emotions on top
Yeah.
of my own. So I
Obviously.
think when it comes to two individual patients going through this
Mhm.
process, it's worth noting, family dynamics,
Yeah.
and how a lot of people won't necessarily want family involvement at all
Mhm.
times with it, because it's such a difficult thing for the whole
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
very personal decision that you
Yeah.
take, yeah, to go through that. So, what do you think about the opportunity to access genetic testing as a matter of routine for families that are affected by young onset dementia?
Um, I absolutely think it should be routine. I think the logistics of how to make it routine is
Mm.
perhaps more difficult. There needs to be someone in the family with that diagnosis and the
Yeah.
gene in the first place, which is something I didn't have at the time. And actually, both my dad and I
Mhm.
um, were what felt, we felt palmed off by professionals. So even the first time I went to the GP about it, when I was probably 21, 22, and said I wanted to start this process, I was kind of laughed out the room by the
Mhm.
GP, and I was so young and not confident enough to
Yeah.
press my point, and I can't remember how much information I truly had at the time, but there was this view of, you're too young, would you even want to know that anyway?
Mm.
And it actually took
Yeah.
multiple visits to have it happen. And I think if it can become protocol within the group of professionals who already know what they're talking about
Yeah.
with this, it will make young people going through this feel like they were seen and
Mm.
supported,
Yeah.
and that they have options. I very much, even during my teenage years, knowing this was happening, um, there was a lot going on in my family, and I didn't particularly in any way at any point feel supported by any professionals that I
Mm.
had contact with, whether it was healthcare, education,
Yeah.
prison system. There was just nothing there. And I felt like I was advocating for myself most of the time. And it wasn't until I started the genetic counselling and finally was referred by the GP that I finally felt like
Mm.
I was talking to someone who understood, and
Yeah.
actually not only just understood, but actually gave me the barriers I needed. For instance, he
Mm.
said, "You're moving into a new house. You need to wait until that point in your life till you've had that stability." I didn't agree. I wanted to know straight
Okay.
away,
Yeah. Yeah.
soon
Yeah.
as possible. And he said, "No, I'm going to wait until February, until you've moved in December." And he was totally right. Like, you need to be in that headspace. And for instance, if I had to find out now, I've got young kids now. I've got 3 young
Yeah.
kids. I've got a job. I don't know how I would handle that. And actually, that was the perfect point in time for me
Mm.
to find out.
Yeah.
And you need professionals to help guide you with that, I think, to make sure you've got the best outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's really important. Yeah. So, do you have any messages to others who may be considering genetic testing?
I think I don't know how things have changed since
Mm.
I was that age looking at that stuff, but I think it's important to try and stay informed, try and do your research,
Yeah.
advocate for yourself, and also connect with other people who have been
Mm.
through it. Like, I can't express how important that is. Like, I had, even when I was in the depths of all of it, and I still am now with my dad in the final stages, and my sister perhaps having it. I've also got 2 aunts,
Yeah.
one who has it now, one who's died of it. Um, Even friends were still saying things to me like, "Oh, isn't Alzheimer's just what old people have?" Like, they hadn't grasped it. And when you're young, especially, I think as you
Yeah.
get older, people become more aware of these
Yeah.
things and a
Absolutely.
little bit more soft and sensitive as you age. But in those early 20s, you know, there's no one else around you who gets it
Yeah.
or is
Exactly.
even willing to get it because you're just at that age. And it's the same with children and teenagers who have it in the family. It's just really difficult. And I think it's really important to reach out to the people that know what they're talking about. But it's easier said than done when you're young. And I think
Yeah.
that's why it's really important for it to be routined, like you said, within
Yeah.
healthcare, especially once a parent has been diagnosed, to make sure that you're following up with that family
Yeah.
as they grow up. And I also think it's really important because I was able to know and make a decision on how I had children.
Mhm.
And, we actually have the ability to wipe out this genetic form within a
Yeah.
generation or two
Yeah.
if everyone is informed,
Yeah.
and they make those decisions to do that if they wish.
Yeah. That's,
So, yeah, I think, yeah, just being informed and emotionally supported is
yeah.
really important. Yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Jess, for sharing your experience and
no problem.
your information today. It's been really valuable to hear from you and to hear what you went through and for you to share that with other people that are listening to us. So thank you very much for
No
being part of it
problem.
today. Thank
Thank
you.
you.